My parents handed my sister the spare key to my house while I was at work. 7 years of 60-hour work weeks, ramen dinners, and saying no to every vacation to save for this house. But my parents thought my sacrifice meant nothing compared to my sister's needs. "You're being selfish," they said when I refused to give up my home. So I showed them what selfish really looks like. I cut them off completely. I'm Jennifer, and this is the story of how my family tried to steal my American dream and how I fought back. It started like any other Tuesday. I was wrapping up a client meeting when my phone buzzed with a text from my college roommate, Maya. "Hey girl, why is your sister posting Instagram stories inside your house? Thought you were at work?" My blood ran cold. I stared at that message for a full 30 seconds before my brain could process what she was saying. Sarah was in my house? My house? I immediately opened Instagram, and there it was, a story from my sister showing her kids playing in what was unmistakably my living room. The couch I'd saved for 8 months to buy. The coffee table I'd assembled myself at 2 a.m. after a double shift. The family photos on the mantle that included everyone except her drama-filled life. My hands were shaking as I called her. She picked up on the fourth ring, and I could hear my nephew laughing in the background, the sound echoing through my kitchen. "Sarah, what the hell are you doing in my house?" "Oh, hey Jen, Mom gave me your spare key. Don't worry, we're just hanging out here for a bit. The kids love the backyard." Her voice was so casual, so entitled, like she was borrowing a cup of sugar instead of breaking into my home. "Your what? Mom doesn't have permission to give out my keys." "Come on, don't be so dramatic. It's not like you're using the space. This place is way too big for just you anyway." Way too big for just me. The house I'd dreamed about since college. The house I'd worked myself to exhaustion to afford. Too big for just me. I hung up and immediately called my mother. "Jennifer, honey, before you get upset." "Before I get upset?" "Mom, you gave Sarah my house key without asking me." She just needed somewhere to take the kids for the afternoon. Her apartment is so cramped, and you have all that lovely space going to waste. Going to waste? It's my space. I live there. Don't raise your voice at me, young lady. Sarah is going through a difficult time right now. Her husband lost his job and they're struggling. The least you could do is help your family. The least I could do? As if the last 7 years of my life meant nothing. Let me paint you a picture of those 7 years. While my friends were going on spring break trips to Cancun, I was working double shifts at the restaurant and freelancing graphic design until 3 a.m. While they were buying cute outfits and going to concerts, I was eating 50-cent ramen and shopping at thrift stores. While they were dating and having fun, I was saving every single penny for one goal, owning my own home. 60-hour work weeks became my normal. I had a full-time marketing job and 3 freelance clients. My social life consisted of grabbing coffee with friends maybe once a month, and even then I'd order the cheapest thing on the menu. I lived in a studio apartment that was barely bigger than most people's closets, sleeping on a futon and using a TV tray as my dining table. But I had a plan. Every sacrifice was worth it because I could see my future, a real home, with a real kitchen where I could cook actual meals, a bedroom with enough space for a real bed, maybe even a guest room where friends could stay. My own little piece of the American dream. I remember the day I finally had enough for the down payment. I sat in my car outside the bank, staring at the approval letter, and I cried. Not sad tears, pure joy. I'd done it. All by myself. No help from parents, no trust fund, no inheritance. Just me, my determination, and 7 years of sacrifice. The house hunting process was magical. I fell in love with this little 3-bedroom ranch with the most beautiful oak tree in the front yard. It needed some work, but it was perfect. It was mine. My parents seemed proud when I told them I was buying a house. "We raised such a responsible daughter," Mom said. Dad nodded approvingly and talked about how smart I was with money, but even then, I should have seen the signs. "It's so big for just you," Mom mentioned during the housewarming party. "You'll have to host all the family gatherings now." "Make sure you have space for us when we visit," Dad added with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "And Sarah, Sarah, who was living with her husband and 2 kids in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, constantly complaining about money. Sarah looked around my house with something that wasn't quite happiness for my success. It was envy. Pure, undisguised envy. But I was so high on achieving my goal that I missed all the red flags. The comments started subtly. Family dinners became exercises in passive-aggressive guilt trips. "Jennifer's house is so lovely," Mom would say to relatives. "3 bedrooms, 2 baths, such a waste for one person." "Sarah's kids would love that backyard," Dad would add. "Too bad some people don't like to share." Sarah herself became a master of the guilt trip. "Must be nice to have all that space," she'd say whenever her kids were acting up in their small apartment. "Some of us don't have the luxury of rooms we don't even use." I tried to be understanding. I really did. When Sarah hinted that they needed help with rent, I slipped her $500. When she mentioned the kids needed school supplies, I bought everything on their list. When her husband was between jobs, I paid for their groceries for 3 weeks. But it was never enough. Every act of generosity just seemed to fuel their sense of entitlement. The real pressure started about 6 months after I moved in. Sarah called me crying one night, saying they might get evicted. Could they possibly just stay with me for a couple of weeks? Just until they got back on their feet? "I don't think that's a good idea," I said, trying to be gentle but firm. "You guys need your own space, and I need mine." "Come on, Jen, we're family. It would just be temporary." "Sarah, you have 2 kids and a husband. My house isn't set up for 5 people. You have 3 bedrooms. I have a home office and a guest room. That's not the same as having space for a family of 4 to live." The conversation ended with Sarah in tears and me feeling like the world's biggest monster. That's when the real campaign started. Suddenly, every family gathering included subtle digs about my selfishness. Mom would make comments about how family should always come first. Dad would talk about how his generation always helped each other out. Extended family members who'd never shown interest in my life before were suddenly asking why I wasn't helping Sarah. "It's just temporary," became the family motto. "Family helps family," they'd say, like it was some sacred law I was violating. "You have so much room," as if having space meant I was obligated to fill it with people I didn't want living with me. The gaslighting was subtle but constant. They made me question everything. Was I being selfish? Should family come before personal boundaries? Was I wrong to want to enjoy the home I'd worked so hard for? I started second-guessing myself constantly. Maybe I was being unreasonable. Maybe good daughters do let their sisters move in when times are tough. Maybe I was too attached to material things. But then I'd remember those 7 years. 7 years of sacrifice that nobody else had made. 7 years of saying no to everything fun so I could say yes to my dream. 7 years that apparently meant nothing to my family. The breaking point should have been obvious, but I was too deep in the fog of family manipulation to see it coming. It was a Thursday when Mom called with her latest guilt trip. "Jennifer, we need to talk. Sarah's landlord is raising their rent, and they simply can't afford it. They're going to be homeless. Mom, they've had months to figure this out. Sarah needs to find a more affordable place or get a second job." "How can you be so cold? These are your niece and nephew we're talking about." "I'm not being cold. I'm being realistic. My house isn't a solution to Sarah's financial problems." "You're being selfish, Jennifer, pure and simple. You have all that space, and your sister has nowhere to go." "I worked for 7 years to buy that space. 7 years of 60-hour weeks and eating ramen every night. I didn't do that so Sarah could move in." "Money isn't everything, young lady. Family is what matters." Easy for her to say. She hadn't spent 7 years sacrificing everything for a goal, only to have family members act like that goal was community property. If family matters so much, why don't they move in with you and Dad? "Our house isn't big enough." "Neither is mine. Not for 5 people. "Jennifer Thompson, I raised you better than this. Your sister needs help and you're turning your back on family." The conversation ended with me in tears and Mom disappointed in the daughter she'd apparently raised wrong. That night, I sat in my kitchen, the kitchen I'd dreamed about for years, and wondered if they were right. Was I selfish? Was I prioritizing material things over family relationships? But then I looked around at everything I'd worked for. The house represented more than just square footage. It represented independence, security, and proof that I could achieve my goals through hard work and determination. It was my safe space, my sanctuary, my reward for years of sacrifice, and they wanted me to give it up without a second thought. I called my friend Maya, the one who'd texted me about Sarah being in my house. "They're trying to guilt trip you into giving up your home," she said immediately. "That's not normal family behavior, Jen." "But what if they're right? What if I am being selfish?" "You worked 7 years for that house. 7 years. Did Sarah work 7 years to help you buy it?" "No, but..." "Did your parents contribute to your down payment?" "No, they said I needed to learn independence." "Then how is it suddenly their decision what you do with your house?" Maya was right, but the family pressure was relentless. Every conversation became about Sarah's situation. Every visit included comments about my extra space. Every interaction left me feeling guilty and confused. I tried compromising. I offered to help Sarah look for affordable apartments. I offered to babysit the kids so she could work more hours. I offered financial help for moving expenses. None of it was good enough. The only acceptable solution, according to my family, was for me to open my home to them indefinitely. "Just until they get back on their feet," Mom kept saying, as if that meant anything when Sarah had been temporarily struggling for 3 years. The manipulation escalated. Dad started calling me at work to lecture me about family values. Mom would cry during phone calls about how disappointed she was in the daughter she'd raised. Sarah sent me photos of her kids looking sad in their cramped apartment. They were wearing me down, and they knew it. But I held firm. This was my house, bought with my money, earned through my sacrifice. I had the right to decide who lived there. That's when they stopped asking for permission and decided to take what they wanted anyway. I should have seen it coming. The secret phone calls between Mom and Sarah that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. The way they exchanged looks during family dinners. The sudden shift from trying to convince me to acting like the decision had already been made. "Sarah's going to need those keys soon," Mom mentioned casually during Sunday dinner. "What keys?" "Your house keys, for when they move in next week." "They're not moving in next week. They're not moving in at all." "Jennifer, we've been patient with your selfishness, but enough is enough. Sarah's family needs a place to live, and you have the space. End of discussion." "It's not the end of discussion. It's my house. And we're your family. Family helps family." That phrase again. Family helps family. As if it was a one-way street that only led to my house. I left dinner early that night, shaking with anger and frustration. They were acting like my opinion didn't matter, like my 7 years of work and sacrifice gave me no say in how my own home was used. I thought they'd back down. I thought when they realized I was serious about saying no, they'd respect my boundaries and find another solution. I was wrong. The next Tuesday, while I was at work, my parents made their move. They used the spare key I'd given them for emergencies, the key that was supposed to be for situations like water pipe bursts or medical emergencies, not family coups. They let Sarah and her family into my house. My house. When Maya texted me about Sarah's Instagram story, I felt something break inside me. Not just anger, something deeper, trust, respect, the fundamental belief that my family saw me as an autonomous adult with the right to make my own decisions. They'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I called in sick for the rest of the day and drove home with my heart pounding. I had no idea what I was going to find, but I knew everything had changed. The first thing I noticed was the minivan in my driveway. Sarah's beat-up Honda Odyssey parked where I usually put my car, like she owned the place. The front door was unlocked. I walked into my own home and found chaos. Toys scattered across my living room floor, cartoon characters blaring from my TV, the smell of something burning in my kitchen, Sarah's kids running around like they owned the place while Sarah sat on my couch, scrolling through her phone like this was completely normal. "Oh, hey, Jen," she said when she saw me, not even bothering to look up from her screen. "Don't worry about the mess. We'll clean up later." "Sarah, what the hell is going on?" "Mom didn't tell you. We're moving in. Isn't that great? The kids are so excited to have more space. I looked around my home, my sanctuary, my reward for 7 years of sacrifice, and saw it being treated like a free hotel. You can't just move in without asking me. We did ask. You said no, so Mom and Dad made the decision for you. Made the decision for me. Like I was a child who couldn't be trusted to make my own choices about my own property. This is my house, Sarah. I bought it. I pay the mortgage. I make the decisions. Come on, don't be so dramatic. We're family. What's yours is ours, right? Wrong. So incredibly wrong. That's when I noticed the suitcases. Multiple suitcases lined up in my hallway like they were moving in permanently. How long are you planning to stay? Just until we get back on our feet, temporarily. The same temporarily they'd been promising for months. I called my parents immediately. Oh, good, you're home, Mom said cheerfully. Isn't it wonderful? Sarah's family is all settled in. They're not settled in anything. This is my house. Jennifer, we've been patient with your attitude, but this is bigger than your wants. Sarah's children need stability. Then Sarah needs to provide that stability herself. She's trying her best. Not everyone is as privileged as you. Privileged, as if working 60-hour weeks for 7 years was a privilege. I earned this house. No one gave it to me. And now you can share that blessing with your family. Isn't that what being a good person is about? A good person. They were questioning whether I was a good person because I wanted to maintain ownership of my own home. If Sarah needs a place to stay, she can stay with you and Dad. Our house is too small. Then maybe she should find an apartment she can actually afford instead of trying to move into mine. Don't you dare raise your voice at me, young lady. We raised you to care about family, not to be selfish and greedy. Selfish and greedy, for wanting to live in the house I'd bought with my own money. The call ended with Mom hanging up on me. I stood in my kitchen that now had Sarah's dishes in the sink and her kids' artwork stuck to my refrigerator, and realized my family had declared war on my independence. They thought they could guilt me, manipulate me, and finally just override me completely. They thought I'd cave under the pressure and accept their decision. They were about to learn how wrong they were. But first, I had to face the reality of what they'd done. They hadn't just disrespected my boundaries, they'd obliterated them. They'd treated my home like community property, and my opinion like it didn't matter. As I watched Sarah's kids run through my house like they owned it, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake, I felt something I'd never felt toward my family before. Pure, justified rage. The little girl who'd always tried to keep everyone happy, who'd bent over backward to be the good daughter, who'd sacrificed her own needs to avoid family conflict. That girl died in that moment, and in her place stood a woman who was about to show them exactly what they'd awakened. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my car outside my own house at 2 a.m., watching the lights flicker on and off as Sarah's family settled into my space. My sanctuary had been invaded, my boundaries obliterated, and my 7 years of sacrifice dismissed like they meant nothing. But sitting there in the darkness, something shifted inside me. The crushing weight of guilt and confusion that had been suffocating me for months suddenly lifted, replaced by crystal clear clarity. This wasn't about helping family. This was about control. For the first time in my life, I stopped asking myself if I was being selfish and started asking why my family thought they were entitled to steal my home. I pulled out my phone and started researching. Family manipulation tactics. Narcissistic family patterns. How to deal with entitled relatives. What I found made everything click into place. Gaslighting. Check. Making me question my own reality and feelings. Triangulation. Check. Getting other family members to pressure me. Financial abuse? Check. Acting like my resources belonged to everyone. Boundary violation? Check. Ignoring my clearly stated limits. The golden child scapegoat dynamic? Double check. Sarah could do no wrong while I was painted as the selfish villain for wanting to keep what I'd earned. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't selfish. I was being manipulated by people who saw me as a resource to be exploited. not a person with rights and feelings. As the sun came up, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being their ATM with a house attached. I was done being the family member who had to sacrifice everything while Sarah got to play victim. I was done pretending that blood relation gave them the right to abuse me. I was taking my life back. First stop, the locksmith. I need my locks changed immediately. I told the guy on the phone. Emergency service. I'll pay whatever it costs. Lady, it's 7 a.m. I'll pay double. He was at my house by 8:30. I waited until I saw Sarah's minivan leave, probably taking the kids to school, before I went inside. The place looked like a tornado had hit it. Toys everywhere, dishes piled in the sink. My furniture moved around to accommodate their stuff. I took pictures of everything. If this was war, I needed evidence. The locksmith worked while I started gathering all of Sarah's belongings. Clothes, toys, toiletries, everything. I wasn't throwing it away. I wasn't cruel, but I was packing it up neatly and putting it by the front door. New locks are in, the locksmith said, handing me the keys. You sure you don't want to give a spare to anyone? Absolutely not. By the time Sarah returned with her kids, I was ready. I met her in the driveway. Her face went from confusion to anger in about 2 seconds when she realized what was happening. Jennifer, what the hell? The key doesn't work. That's because I changed the locks. You can't do that. We live here now. No, you don't. You never did. This is my house and you're not welcome here. Her kids were starting to cry, which broke my heart, but this wasn't about them. This was about their mother's entitlement and my family's manipulation. Mom and Dad are going to be furious. Let them be furious. Your stuff is packed and by the front door. You have 1 hour to collect it before I put it in storage. You can't kick us out. We have nowhere to go. You had somewhere to go before you moved into my house without permission. Figure it out. I walked inside and locked the door behind me. Sarah banged on it for 5 minutes before finally loading her stuff and leaving. My phone started ringing immediately. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then Dad called. Voicemail. Sarah called back 3 times. Voicemail. I needed time to think, to plan, to prepare for what was coming next, because I knew this was just the beginning. The voicemails were brutal. Mom crying about how disappointed she was, Dad yelling about respect and family values, Sarah screaming about how I'd made her children homeless. But for the first time in months, I felt at peace in my own home. I called my therapist. Yes, I had one because unlike my family, I believed in mental health, and got an emergency session scheduled for that afternoon. Jennifer, what you're describing is a classic case of family enmeshment and financial abuse, Dr. Rodriguez said after I explained the situation. Your family has been grooming you to believe that your resources belong to them. The fact that they gave away your house key without your permission is a massive violation. But they keep saying family should help family. Help, yes. Exploitation? No. Did they help you buy this house? No. Did they contribute to your 7 years of sacrifice? No. Did they ask what you needed or wanted before making decisions about your property? No. Then this isn't about family helping family. This is about family taking from family. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing it and feeling strong enough to act on it were 2 different things. What do I do now? They're going to make my life hell. You set boundaries and enforce them. And Jennifer? You might need to consider going low contact or no contact for a while. Your family is showing you who they really are. Believe them. That evening, I drafted a text message to the family group chat. After careful consideration, I've decided to take a break from family interactions. Sarah and her family are not welcome in my home. Any future visits or contact needs to be arranged directly with me, not decided for me. I need space to process how my boundaries have been violated. Please respect this decision. I stared at that message for an hour before hitting send. The response was immediate and explosive. Mom, how dare you, after everything we've done for you? Dad, this is not how we raised you. Sarah, you've made your own niece and nephew homeless. I hope you can live with yourself. My Aunt Karen chimed in. What's wrong with you, Jennifer? Family doesn't abandon family. Uncle Mike, disappointed in you, kid. Your parents deserve better. Even my cousin Lisa, who I barely talked to, felt the need to add, "This is really selfish behavior. I'm shocked." It was a coordinated attack, and it almost worked. For about 10 minutes, I felt like maybe I was the monster they were painting me as. Then I remembered something Dr. Rodriguez had said. When you start setting boundaries with people who are used to having none, they'll escalate their behavior. This reaction tells you everything you need to know about whether you made the right choice. The calls started the next day, not just from immediate family, but from extended relatives I hadn't heard from in years, all with the same message. I was selfish. I was wrong. I needed to let Sarah move back in. It was clear my parents had launched a full-scale campaign to pressure me into submission. That's when I realized I needed to document everything. Screenshots of every text, recordings of voicemails, legal in my state, notes about every conversation. If they wanted to wage war on my reputation, I needed evidence of what was really happening. The breaking point came 3 days after I changed the locks. I was at work when my assistant knocked on my office door. "Jennifer, there are some people here to see you. They say they're your family?" My heart sank. They'd brought the fight to my workplace. Mom, Dad, and Sarah were standing in our lobby with Sarah's kids, making a scene. Other employees were staring, and my boss looked concerned. "We need to talk," Dad said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "About how you abandoned your family." I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. This was my professional reputation, my career, my livelihood. How dare they? "You need to leave," I said quietly. "This is my workplace." "We'll leave when you agree to let your sister move back home where she belongs," Mom said, tears streaming down her face. "How can you live with yourself knowing your niece and nephew are sleeping in a car?" "You're sleeping in a car?" I asked Sarah. "Well, no, we're staying with friends, but—" "Then you're not homeless. You need to leave my office." "Not until you give us your keys," Dad said. That's when I snapped. 7 years of working 60-hour weeks, 7 years of sacrifice, 7 years of building a career and a life, and they were trying to destroy it all because I wouldn't give them my house. "Get out!" I shouted, loud enough that the entire office went silent. "Get out of my workplace right now!" Security was called. My family was escorted out. I spent the rest of the day in meetings with HR, explaining the situation and hoping I wouldn't lose my job over their drama. That night, I made the hardest decision of my life. I blocked all their phone numbers. I blocked them on social media. I changed my email address and didn't give them the new one. I was going no contact with my entire family. The silence was deafening at first. For 32 years, my life had revolved around managing my family's emotions and expectations. Suddenly, there was just peace. No guilt trips about not visiting enough. No manipulation about helping Sarah. No pressure to be someone I wasn't. No constant drama that sucked the energy out of every day. For the first time in my adult life, I could just exist without apologizing for it. The first week was hard. I kept reaching for my phone to call Mom about something before remembering that I couldn't. I felt guilty about missing my nephew's soccer game, even though I'd never been invited to one before this whole mess started. But as the days turned into weeks, something beautiful happened. I rediscovered who I was without my family's dysfunction defining me. I started cooking again, real meals in my beautiful kitchen, not sad microwave dinners eaten while stressed about the latest family crisis. I invited friends over for the first time since buying the house. Maya came for dinner, and we laughed until midnight without me checking my phone once for guilt trip texts. I bought furniture that I actually liked instead of the bland, safe choices I'd made while worried about family approval. I started sleeping through the night for the first time in months. Most importantly, I started living for myself instead of managing everyone else's emotions. But my family wasn't done with me yet. 3 weeks into no contact, I came home to find Sarah's husband, Mike, sitting on my front porch. "We need to talk," he said. Mike had always been the most reasonable one in Sarah's family. If anyone could have an adult conversation about this situation, it would be him. "Sarah doesn't know I'm here," he said, "but this has gone too far." "I agree. Your wife needs to stop expecting me to solve her problems. Jennifer, I get it. I really do. We had no right to move into your house without asking. That was wrong. Finally, someone acknowledging reality. But the kids don't understand why Aunt Jennifer suddenly disappeared. They keep asking if you hate them. The guilt hit like a physical blow. Those kids had done nothing wrong. They were innocent victims of their parents' entitlement and my family's manipulation. I don't hate them, Mike. I love them. But I can't have a relationship with them while their mother and my parents refuse to respect basic boundaries. What if Sarah apologized? What if she promised it would never happen again? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that Sarah could change, that my family could learn to treat me with respect. But I'd been down this road before. Every time I gave them another chance, they escalated their behavior. Every time I tried to compromise, they took it as permission to push further. Mike, Sarah has never once apologized for anything. Not for moving into my house without permission. Not for letting our parents give away my keys. Not for bringing the drama to my workplace. She's only sorry that I'm not rolling over and taking it anymore. She's struggling, Jennifer. We both are. I lost my job, and finding work has been harder than we expected. I'm sorry you're struggling. I really am. But your financial problems don't give you the right to my house. What if we paid rent? It's not about money, Mike. It's about respect. It's about my right to make decisions about my own life and property. It's about not being guilted and manipulated every time I say no to something. He left, looking defeated, and I felt terrible. But I also felt proud of myself for staying strong. The next escalation came through my job again. My boss called me into her office looking uncomfortable. Jennifer, I received a call from someone claiming to be your mother. She said you'd had some kind of mental breakdown and weren't capable of making good decisions right now. She wanted me to convince you to call her. My blood boiled. They were literally trying to sabotage my career and destroy my reputation by claiming I was mentally unstable. My mother is lying. I'm fine. I've cut contact with my family because they've been financially and emotionally abusive. I have documentation of everything if you need to see it. I figured it was something like that. The way she talked about you, it didn't sound like how a loving mother would describe her daughter. It sounded manipulative. Even strangers could see what I'd been blind to for years. But that phone call was the final straw. They'd crossed every line there was to cross. They'd invaded my home, disrupted my workplace, and now they were trying to destroy my professional reputation. It was time to stop playing defense and start playing offense. I drafted a detailed email documenting everything that had happened, the manipulation, the guilt trips, the boundary violations, the key incident, the workplace harassment, and now the attempt to sabotage my career. I sent it to every extended family member who had texted me with criticism. All the aunts and uncles and cousins who had called me selfish without knowing the full story. The email was calm, factual, and devastating. I laid out the timeline of events, included screenshots of the nastiest text messages, and explained exactly why I'd gone no contact. I want you all to understand, I wrote in the conclusion, that I didn't abandon my family. My family abandoned me the moment they decided my 7 years of sacrifice meant nothing compared to Sarah's wants. They abandoned me when they chose manipulation over respect. They abandoned me when they decided to override my decisions about my own property. I'm not the villain in this story. I'm the person who finally got tired of being treated like one. The response was swift and telling. Some relatives apologized immediately. My cousin Mark wrote a long message about how he'd been given a completely different version of events and was horrified by the truth. My Aunt Susan called my parents' behavior absolutely unacceptable and promised to stop participating in their pressure campaign. Others doubled down on defending my parents, proving that the manipulation ran deeper than just my immediate family. But about half of my extended family switched sides once they knew the real story. The ones who mattered, the ones with integrity, stood up for me. More importantly, I stood up for myself. 6 months later, I was a completely different person. I'd gotten a promotion at work, partly because I was no longer constantly distracted by family drama. I'd started dating again. A wonderful man named David who couldn't believe any family would treat their daughter the way mine had treated me. I'd made new friends through hobbies I finally had time to pursue. My house had become what I'd always dreamed it would be: a sanctuary, a place of peace, a home that reflected who I really was instead of who my family wanted me to be. The holidays were the hardest part. 32 years of family traditions were hard to break. But Maya and her family invited me to their Thanksgiving, and it was the most relaxed holiday I'd ever experienced. No guilt trips, no drama, no walking on eggshells. Just good food and people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. That's when I realized what I'd been missing my whole life: the difference between real family and biological relatives who happened to share my DNA. Real family doesn't guilt trip you for having boundaries. Real family doesn't steal your house keys and act surprised when you're upset. Real family doesn't try to sabotage your career when you won't give them what they want. Real family celebrates your successes instead of treating them as resources to be exploited. My biological family had never been my real family. They'd been my first abusers, teaching me that love came with conditions and strings attached, that my worth was measured by what I could provide for them. Going no contact wasn't the end of my family relationships. It was the beginning of my real family relationships, with people who chose to love and support me without expecting me to set myself on fire to keep them warm. A year later, I heard through my cousin Mark that Sarah and Mike had gotten back on their feet. Mike found a good job, they moved into a nice apartment, and the kids were doing well in school. Sarah had even started working part-time. They'd been capable of solving their own problems all along. They just hadn't needed to while they thought they could guilt me into solving them instead. I felt vindicated, but also sad. Sad for the relationships we could have had if they'd been willing to treat me with respect. Sad for the years I'd wasted trying to earn love from people who only saw me as a resource. Sad for the woman I used to be, who thought she had to sacrifice everything to be worthy of love. But mostly, I felt grateful. Grateful for the strength to set boundaries. Grateful for the clarity to recognize manipulation when I saw it. Grateful for the courage to choose my own well-being over their dysfunction. Grateful for the chance to build real relationships with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. My house is quieter now, but it's filled with the laughter of friends who choose to be there. My life is smaller in some ways, but it's infinitely richer. My family is smaller too, but it's real. To anyone listening to this story who sees themselves in it, who recognizes the guilt trips and manipulation and boundary violations, I want you to know something. You are not responsible for solving other people's problems, even if they're family. You are not selfish for wanting to enjoy the fruits of your own labor. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You deserve relationships based on mutual respect, not exploitation. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for them is to walk away. My family taught me that blood is thicker than water. But what they never taught me is that the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The family you choose will always be stronger than the family you're born into. And I chose myself. Finally, after 32 years, I chose myself. And that choice saved my life.